Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. We air every Friday at noon, and we mainly talk about different aspects of recovery, different modalities, topics. We interview people who are therapists or have walked through a lot and can be very inspiring. And lately we've been focusing on different tools in recovery and interviewing people that I feel personally, having walked through stuff with them and watched them, that I feel that their story is inspiring. I myself, as you know, if you've seen any of the past episodes, am what would be considered a low bottom. I had a lot of my outside stuff and my personal health threatened. I've been in and out of a semi-comatose state, ended up with epilepsy, thousands of seizures, a spine injury, multiple addictions, and extreme PTSD. And I've been homeless. I've lost everything twice and nearly died 2 times. And sometimes it takes a lot of that before a person can seek help. So not everybody's story is like that, but for when there are people who have overcome things from what people would say would be like a low bottom, it helps people who haven't gotten to a low bottom like that as well. When I see people who have overcome so much, I feel like they can inspire not just people who have been through some of the heavier stuff, but also people that don't need to. You know, that, wow, if that person can walk through that. And the other thing is that, you know, through recovery, there's a saying that some come for relief and some come for recovery. And once we get that attitude of, wow, I can overcome this, what else can I overcome? We think, wow, like, if these tools work for that, maybe they could work for this too. And we keep applying it. We keep, you know, it's not enough that we're just sober off of drugs and alcohol. We want to be freer and freer and freer, and we want to be more awake and more authentic, and we want our relationships to improve, and we want our health to improve, and we start to take more responsibility for our part in things, everything, and we start to see a way out of things that we might have felt were incurable or unmanageable, and that's how they were going to be forever. And so there is a woman that I met about 4 years ago, and I have watched her walk through so much, and her recovery has benefited my recovery and my life in so many ways. And she just has a beautiful energy and a beautiful attitude, and is always willing to be of service, always willing to be helpful, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see someone with such an attitude of gratitude and a solution-oriented mentality, and it's just refreshing. I love that. You know, in recovery, we're all coming from a different place, blooming where we're planted, and there are some people that are responsible for a lot of things that people come in. They just, you know, go to groups or to rehabs or to events or anything, and it's there. They go, they experience it, but there are people that really make these things happen. And you know, and through COVID, this particular lady was very, very helpful to me as well. And I just felt like there was a group of us that were really focused on, you know, what we felt was really important, which was, you know, people really needing help during that. So I will always be eternally grateful to her. And so I asked her to be on the show, partly because I just love her. I love her spirit, but also because she has so much in her walk that she's accomplished and moved through. And she's just a really great testimony of recovery, of real recovery. And so welcome, Lauren, to the show. And at this point, you could just start telling us about your childhood, about, you know, where you felt some of the stuff that later had to be healed and maybe lent itself to what ended up happening in your addiction. started?
Yeah. I think like for me, I was always kind of one of those kids, like growing up, I always kind of felt like I knew who I was. Like I always kind of marched to the beat of my own drum. I mean, during COVID, I got back in. That was one of the things that I was grateful for with recovery was I kind of felt like I started to reconnect with the person that I always thought I knew I was when I was growing up, And, I got back into fostering animals again. And, you saw me like...
And we have too.
Yeah, and showing up with like random cats and dogs. And so I started doing that. And I did that in high school. I would show up with kittens and bottle feed them in between classes. And I was always doing that type of stuff. And when I got to college, that was where I picked up my first drink, And I think it's quite easy for me to maybe misjudge what my drinking looked like because I instantly binge drank, because it blended in seamlessly with what, college drinking looked like, And so I don't fully know or really realize if the scope of my drinking was alcoholic or if it was, just like the classic, like party days of the college drinking. But I do know that I was always one of those that when I drank, it was not just the norm, and it was always to excess. It was always to black out. It was always obscene.
So why do you think that happened? I know like sometimes people have rough stuff in their childhood that they just don't want to feel or anything. Did you ever find out why you became?
I don't fully, I never really had, looking back, and I don't know if that was just like some of the healing that I did as a result of my recovery and getting into my recovery and really looking at my life and because I remember when I first got sober, one of the things that I really wanted to do was look at my life, and I really wanted to heal. And I knew that part of being in recovery, and I know we'll get into that too, I was in a court-ordered program that also required me to do counseling. And I was like, I'm going to do everything that they tell me to do because I knew that it would save my life. I just knew it because I didn't know who I was anymore. I was like, I couldn't even look myself in the eyes in the mirror, and I didn't even know what I looked like anymore because I just was ashamed, so deeply ashamed of everything that I had become. I'm always so well-intended, but I don't know how to show up for anybody. And but when I look back, like growing up, I had a great childhood. My mom always showed up for me. Things when I look at, like, my brother died when I was really young. He was diagnosed with cancer when he was 9, and then he passed away when he was 10, just before he turned 11. So for me, I think I was forced to kind of grow up fairly early, and I think I was alone a lot of the time, like between my two parents, they kind of had to shuffle him to treatment or, to various doctors or whatever the case may be. And I was kind of either by myself or at school or with the neighbor, and
so that could do it right there.
Maybe.
Yeah. To feel alone, to feel not connected, to feel like a big, huge deal has happened with your brother, not knowing necessarily how to process that. Because even if somebody has, genetically they have a likelihood that they could become an alcoholic or an addict, there usually is concurrently some sort of life event that makes them feel like they cannot just go with everything and just like let go. That there's something they have to be more responsible maybe than they should, more on than maybe they think that they would have if they didn't have that event. Maybe they didn't have the tools to process something that happened if somebody went through a divorce or something. It's not necessarily that they had to have something overtly like horrible happen in their childhood, just something that makes them not feel like they can just be.
Yeah. And I think too, it's interesting that you said that about like almost like having to like shoulder it in a way, like having to be more of an adult or whatever it is, not being able to process it. I think I was like straddling that line where I felt like I needed to be the adult. I felt like I could not be emotional. Like I remember I went to the funeral and I didn't cry. I think it took me like a good 4 years before I shed my first tear, really, like post death. But like, and then prior to that, like I remember I had to just like, I felt this like overwhelming need to like be present and like to show up and to be almost like the adult, you know? And then what's kind of funny is even in my later drinking days, you know, but like all the way from like the beginning to the end, like every time I ordered a drink, like I felt like a grown up. Yeah. Like I felt like I had arrived to adulthood. And every time I'd order my glass of wine and slip a 20 into the machine, and I just felt like I was a big adult. Like I felt like a big kid at the table. And I don't know if maybe I just felt like I was always like shouldering like big kid emotional things, but never being really seen as an adult or treated like one, and then like my drinking made me feel like an adult, and then it spiraled out of control.
Was your brother younger or older than you?
He was the baby.
And so were you the oldest?
I was.
Okay, so that's called the hero child.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually the oldest. It's usually the one that feels like they have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. They have to appear like they have it all together. They can't need too much, you know, and so they have to be on
all the time.
So
and I still feel that
there's
sometimes.
There's a level of, a real true level of self-abandonment when we do that, because I'm also one. And so what ends up happening is there's a don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Whether even somebody said it or they are not feeling their feelings, there's this sense that, you know, we don't want to bring anyone down. We want to be the strong one. They're going to need us to be a strong one. It could have even been something that you said to yourself. It could have been like, wow, like my parents are dealing with my brother and this is overwhelming and I need to be strong for everybody.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I think. I'm pretty sure that's a dialogue I had with myself. Yeah. I don't even think that was anything anyone ever told me.
There's no feeling your feelings.
Yeah. No,
there's stuffing.
There wasn't. It was always stuffing.
And so by the time you get to college and now you're drinking, there's like, okay, I need a break. I need a vacation. Yeah. I need, you know, I'm clocking out.
And it's true.
Clocking out for being an adult right now, but yet I'm going to be a different adult, you know.
Different adult that's over emotional. And and that's true, because like even in my drinking, like the only time that I felt safe enough to really express myself was when I was drinking. You know, if I had anything that I was needed to say, I had to be drunk. Like I couldn't be. Like, I could not speak my truth and not get emotional.
So your inhibitions that you were letting go of is the need to be on, the need to be the adult, and the need to be, like, emotionless. Yeah. I had similar things happen for a different reason. You know, like, I felt like I had to be the adult. My parents were not, though. Like, your parents might have been adulty. My parents were definitely not adulty. They were not parents. And so they were both in their addictions. And so I, too, felt like, you know, I need to be strong. I can't be a burden. I have to be the one that lifts the burden, you know. And while it does lean itself way into recovery to our willingness to be of service, which turns out to be a wonderful gift, you know, we have big hearts and lots of feelings, and so we care about animals, right? We care, and people. It was a curse, in a sense, to feel so responsible when we weren't allowed to be able to just love ourselves and just let go, you know, because that whole thinking that we had before having the balancing of recovery and surrendering and the humility of trusting in a higher power and each other and being equal, you know, not having to be overly responsible for everyone, you know. And yet, with people like us, it still comes out where we'll be the ones being of all the service, you know. Yeah. But we're willing, and it's easier for us because it's natural that that's something we do, but we always have to watch out that we're not burning out and doing too much of that. Oh,
100%. I constantly have to, like, double check myself. Like what is my motive here? What do I expect? Do I expect anything? And if I'm being honest with myself, am I do, because I'll be like, no, I have no expectations here.
Yeah.
And then like 2 weeks later, I'll be like, oh, yes, you
Yeah.
did. You know, like, and then, but so like in the moment, I don't even think I'm lying to myself
Right.
then. And I might not have been.
Right.
But like somewhere down the line,
Right.
I have an expectation
you
that
ever
something
do a
was
thing
attached
and you
to
want to
it.
know whether or not you have any expectation attached to it? Let something not go the way you think that they should. They don't appreciate you enough.
Yes.
They're not giving you something back. Nobody's needing you in exactly the sweetest way. You know, like whatever it is. If I want to know what my motives were behind things, or my co-motives, because it might also be just really just wanting to be helpful, but maybe I'm afraid someone's not going to like me, or or so I'm people pleasing, and it's just like all of a sudden you find out by your own resentment, it's like an alarm that goes off that goes, you might have had a dog in this race. Yeah. You might have not been as altruistic as you sold yourself on. And by the way, here's the data.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, and even if it's just acknowledgement, like I was queen of that. I would be like, I would go above and beyond. I'd do X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and like, but I needed the affirmation, or like I'll
the
pick
atta
you
girl.
up, yeah,
Like,
or
oh,
I'll
thank
pick you up from
you.
I'll pick you up from the airport at 2 a.m. But 6 years later,
Right.
if you don't do me a favor
Right.
when I need you to, I'm gonna hold that over your head, like, and it's like ridiculous,
Yeah.
like, but what happened to you just doing it out of the kindness
Right.
of your heart?
Right.
Like, no,
Right. Did you have like a transactional kind of love in your childhood at all, or in later on too at all? Like, I'll do for you, but there's an expectation that you're gonna do for me.
You know, I don't quite recall that, but I do realize, like, especially I was in one very toxic, like, romantic relationship right before I came into sobriety. And it was very much like that. But I think at the transactional part, and it could have been on his end too, but I think it was more for like me, where I found, and I realized that a lot of it was like a codependency type thing, where it was like, I felt like the more that I gave, the more you'd need me, the more you'd love me, the more likely you'd be to stay, and the more they'd take, and the more I'd give, and then before I knew it, like, I had very little to give.
It's true.
And then I didn't know who I was anymore in that relationship either, and so it's like hard finding that line, but in terms of like growing up, I don't recall that. I know that, like,
I guess
my
it doesn't
mom,
really have to be that. It doesn't really have to be where you were in a transactional situation. If you're somebody who feels like you have to be on and give, then you're going to feel like in some level you're going to starve.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be seeking, you think, people that are going to reciprocate. So at least if I'm abandoning myself and people pleasing, or I'm not doing everything for myself, at least I'll do this stuff for you. At least you'll do this stuff for me too.
Yeah.
But people who give a lot and have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility attract people who want to abdicate responsibility and want to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And want to take.
It's so
and
true.
so it becomes an emotional unavailable. It becomes an emotional unavailable connection, and a self-fulfilling prophecy where we're not getting our needs met. We're not getting our needs met, but we're not giving ourselves that. Because we have this idea that we have to give.
And I heard my counselor told me once, she's like, if you want to change like the narrative, you have to change your own pathology. And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, how do I do that? Like, because by my very nature, like I want to give, I want to see people succeed. I love to watch people thrive and like feel good. And like, that brings me joy. So I am selfish too, because like to make you happy makes me happy, but then at the same time, one thing I do struggle with, and more in sobriety now, is that like, I struggle with that more often than not, people are so used to seeing me on that when I'm not, they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Like that sometimes I want to be like, I'm allowed to feel this way.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you're in the wrong right now.
Right.
Like, let me feel this and leave me alone. Like, you don't need to tend to me. Like
I think
it's
that if I could
did.
say something to that is it's more our issue, not really so much with other people. I think that we're so still programmed to believe that we need to be the strong one.
Yeah.
That when we're not, and we are surrounding ourselves with maybe people who need to see us strong too, like we kind of like do that to ourselves a little bit. I've had to teach people, and so I've actually, in working with people, I tell them, like, please don't put me on a pedestal because I am constantly healing.
Yeah.
Like, there's more. Like, do not think I'm done. Please do not think I'm done, because there will come a time where you will see my, like, ugly cry and, you know, my butt on fire because there's something coming up to heal.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I teach them to not expect that of me, for me to not act like I need to be that person that always has it all together.
Yeah.
You know, and it may threaten a little bit of their confidence in me at points.
Yeah.
But I still would rather do that because, and this is just my own whatever, I feel like my job isn't to be their higher power anyway.
Yeah.
My job is to direct them to their own intuition and to trust and to their own higher power, and to also spread it out and to ask other people for insights, and not just me anyway. You know, and we teach people, right? But it's our own dialogue that tells us we need to be on all the time, and not allow ourselves. It's something I fight all the time, and I have a lot of years sober, and I'm always watching that guy. That one need to not show something's going on.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've learned in sobriety is that, like, my emotions they're valid, but they're not the totality of my reality, and that I am allowed to feel them, and I'm allowed to own them, and if I do that, then they won't own me.
Right.
You know, and so that's one thing that for me it's so important that now that I get to do that, and that when I do that, it gives me the opportunity to really walk through it and be able to appraise them and be like, why do I feel this way? Why am I allowing myself to feel this way? Because more often than not, when I really look at it, it's not just like there's something deeper at play, right?
We're never
like,
upset for the reason we think.
Right,
it's always something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually like my fear of abandonment, or I'm out of control. Like, I'm not in control of the situation, and I'm a control freak, or you're not behaving the way I think you should, or you're not treating me the way I think you should, and somewhere, somehow, I'm not getting what I think I need, and that's usually what it is, and it has nothing to do with like really how I feel. It's just like what I think, and but
I think there's a big difference between feeling sorry for yourself and focusing on the mess and making a problem magnified, kind of thinking, and actually like feeling your feelings and being focused on the solution and being open to it, but being present with yourself and saying, I know I'm going to have a shift around this, but right now, this is what's currently I feel eating my lunch, and bringing the dark to the light, bringing the mess to the message, and allowing for that, because I feel like, especially people like us, it's very easy to get sick in recovery if we are spiritualizing and acting like we're supposed to, like shame, the acronym for shame is should have already mastered everything. So like we feel like we have to look like we have mastered everything, which is like not possible. And at least not for me yet or whatever, but that's not even the point. The point is to be able to say really what's been going on and like what a person is walking through, and say, and I'm open to solutions, but I'm praying about it. I'm doing the work. I am wanting to find out what's going on. What my next right step is. Why am I so afraid? What is this triggering, etc. It allows not just for us to do the right thing by our own recovery, but teach that by our own example, that this is the opposite of the addictive behavior. The addictive behavior says, don't feel. You should be positive. You should be grateful. You should be happy. And while we should be focusing on, where we could be grateful and doing the things, we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're really feeling, so that we give our healing an opportunity to actually come up, to be able to happen. And I feel like you do that. You question and you take responsibility a lot.
I try really hard, and I think you know, one of the things that I'm so thankful for, like, especially like in recovery and in sobriety, is that I was able to surround myself with people fairly early on that challenged me to do stuff like that, right? Like, for example, I was going through something with like a move, and I was frustrated, and I had heard very early on, you know, like, if you're not the problem, there is no solution. So I kind of, you know, but you know, everything is, there's the difference between hearing a quote and applying it to your life, you know, and like, what does it look like in practicality? And it's not always easy, you know, but I would have friends where, like, let's say if I'm venting and I've got these beautiful friends, and rather than just hearing me vent, they would ask me, are you just venting, or do you want to talk about a solution? And as soon as I hear that, like, it gives me the ability to either just vent, right? Because sometimes that's what I want to do, or that's what I need to do. Get the
energy out first,
right? And then I can talk about a solution. And then once I'm able to do that, I can actually look at some stuff. And I've got some great people that have pointed me in the direction of, like, asking, you know, like, a higher power for guidance, you know, or like, show me what I need to see, or remove my fears, or, you know, and just doing stuff like that, just taking small action steps like that. I mean, I know everyone's process is different, but that's what it's been for me, has been hugely beneficial in my recovery, and just really, if I'm quiet enough and I do stuff like that, it stills the thoughts in my head so I can hear something other than myself. And like, it's in moments like that where I can really hear God, right? You know, and like, hear the moments where I can, you know, I had an incident, for example, where I was really uncomfortable the whole way to this. I knew this conversation was happening, right? And I was like, God, show me what I need to see. Show me what I need to see, you know? And I was just like repeating over and over, show me what I need to see. And I was uncomfortable. And I got in there and I sat down. And I literally, it was almost like God whispered in my ear, just shut up. Just listen. And I listened, and I knew that Lauren, the old one, or even, you know, reactive Lauren, would have talked shit, you know, or talked crap, you know, or just spoke out of anger, or spoke to just dig in the knife because she was in pain, because at this point this person was deliberately saying things to hurt my feelings, you know, and God in that moment told me to be quiet, and I was able to really distinctly differentiate the fact that this person was deliberately trying to hurt me, and for some reason it didn't hurt, you know, and I was able to hear it. And like, I went into my car, and I you know, just, it took me a minute, and I was a little emotional, because it's not going to not sting a little bit, but like, I just really realized that, like, even in those moments, maybe I'm not getting what I want, but it's not about finding or getting what I think I need or what I'm supposed to get. It's about building this relationship with something greater than myself, so I can really lean into it in the moments that matter most. And when I do that, I'm removing myself from the equation so I can be a part of something that's kind, you know, when I don't have to be.
Right,
you know?
We don't have to add misery to misery.
Right, and I think about, to be someone, let's say if I were that person in that scenario, right, to be someone that's like that, imagine what their heart feels like on a day-to-day basis.
Hurt people. And I mean, it has to be coming from a place of pain for them, that they feel like their whole peace of mind is dependent upon saying that to you.
Yeah. And so I just think of moments like that, and I ask myself honestly and objectively, I'm like, and I ask myself this all the time, like, what kind of woman would God want me to be here? Like, who would God want me to be here? And those are conversations that prior to recovery I never would have asked myself. I never would have thought I'd ask myself, you know? And like, or like, what if you're having trouble with the God or the higher power concept, you know, like, what would a woman do that trusted God? Right. You know, if you don't trust God, what would a woman that trusted God do? And I'll ask myself that, because sometimes I'll be like, I don't know what she would do. I'm not her right now. I want to be reactive, and I want to be someone I'm not, you know? And so sometimes it's just like taking those action steps that you don't feel like you identify with until you it's almost like you like not fake it till you make it, but it's like taking those actions until you eventually become it, you know? And I don't know if that makes sense, but
Absolutely.
that's just been my experience with like recovery and just walking and practicing principles that like were foreign to me, like, obviously, like, don't steal from your friends and be kind and loving. Those were things that as children, you kind of think they're innate or you're kind of taught. But when I came into recovery and I was such a shell of a human being that all of those things had been thrown to the wind, It's almost like I had to relearn how to be a person of integrity.
And unlearn the things that we thought we needed to do to survive. There was a thing that happened years ago where I felt like I needed, I was very controlling at the time, and I was in a recovery event, and I felt like I knew better than anybody how to run this event. And there was somebody who was relatively new who was super happy to be there and to be taking this position, and I interrupted him in the middle of the event while he was doing his deal and corrected him. And what was so crazy about this is I didn't even know that I even did a thing. Like, I was being so controlling back then was so normal to me that I recovered quite quickly from that experience, but I didn't realize he did not. And so a whole year went by of awkward hugs where I knew something was not right from him. And him just like telling me that we're good, but yet my intuition was saying not so much. Until finally he came up to me and he said, I really need to talk to you, and there's something I really, really need to say to you. And so I was like, okay. And I had a lot of PTSD that still needed to heal. This was about 15, 16 years ago. And so I braced myself and I prayed and I said, all right, God, talk to me and through me. And I just really felt guided to take it as information, to not, I don't have to agree with everything that he says, but I should listen to everything he says and see if any of it resonates, and just stay really in that kind of state of mind. And so, like you were saying, like I was able to listen to everything he said, and he had been holding that for a whole year and like afraid of me and mad at me at the same time. And I was like, able to right away respond by saying, I have had this issue, and I'm so sorry that you held it this long. I mean, I am like, and I wasn't laughing at the time. Like, I really cared. I was like, wow, like, I'm not going to take on that this person, had all this stuff added, because like we said before, we're not upset for the reason we think, and that's his traumas and his stuff and his, the shame that he got hit with when that happened, and the resentment towards me and whatever, that he couldn't let it go, right? But, in recovery we learn, okay, what is our part? And I got to hear my part, and I got to hear it and really hear it and say, I totally understand what you're telling me, and I'm sorry that you felt that way, and I really, honestly, I really shouldn't have done that, and I know that now, and I'm sorry that you felt like you couldn't come to me and talk to me, and please don't ever feel like if I do a thing that you can't come and talk to me, because I feel like I need to see this. I feel like I need to know that this is something that I did, and because I don't want to be the person running on the old programming. So I run on the old programming, I'm going to be the same person that had to drink or use drugs just to feel comfortable in our own skin and use people. I want to keep getting better. So thank you so much. At this time, we're going to take a quick break. And please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. See you in a few. The Meeting Space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships.
During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The Recovery Store in the center of our facility provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the Recovery Store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal.
Welcome back to The Real Recovery Show. Please remember you can watch us on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app. You can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And before the break, we were talking to Lauren about her recovery and just talking about different things that we realized over time. And so now let's get back to you went through drinking in college and became a problem, and what did that look like, and what had to happen for you to get into recovery?
Yeah, so I was one of those where as soon as let me back up for a second. So I hit the sophomore year of my college career, right? And I had hit a place where I couldn't figure out what I wanted to major in, indecision, right?
Yeah.
Famous alcoholic trait, I'd say. But it was one of those things I couldn't figure out what I wanted to major in. I knew I wasn't going to be a person that was a 9-to-5 job, and I didn't want to waste the money anymore. I also, maybe on some subconscious level, knew that it just wasn't me, and my drinking was not exactly the healthiest. But it wasn't monopolizing my life, But when I did drink, it would, And I luckily asked myself the most basic question: what do I enjoy? And what could I see myself doing? And it came down to makeup and photography. And so I was 20 years old, and I decided that I was going to drop out of college and I was going to pursue a career in makeup. And I moved to California, and that was to pursue a career in makeup. And I went to makeup school, and I've been doing makeup for the past 17 years. And I'm successful, self-supporting, and I loved it. I knew from the day one that that was the right decision for me. And I felt so blessed that I had found something at such a young age that really identified with me, and that I knew that that was what I was supposed to be doing. And so fast forward, when my drinking really kind of started to pick up, I got my first DUI when I was 23. And I had been forced, such a victim. My mom told me she wasn't going to pay for my bills anymore. And I either had to get my job that was going to support me in LA, or I had to move back home. And I moved back home, and I used that as an excuse because I'm not accountable yet, right? And to blame it on my drinking, right? Like that I had to move back home. You would drink too if you had the life that I have. And I got a DUI, and that was my first DUI, and that still didn't do anything in terms of change my drinking, except for I was like, I'm never getting another DUI again. Like that really terrified me. And then as my drinking started to increase over the years, the DUIs got closer and closer together, So I only say this because I don't think it's one of those things. There's like that fine line that sometimes we can use those instances as like bravado, not bravado, but like horror stories, I'll show you my battle wound if you show me yours. And those for me, they're not my finest moments, but like those were scars that like I remember being like, this isn't who I was raised to be. Why do I keep ending up in handcuffs? Like my mom is an attorney, you know, like she's ashamed of me, and I always wake up in jail. Like, and it was just like a far cry from the person that, one, I wanted to be, two, I was raised to be, and I just couldn't get away from it, you know. And it was, I remember I had only gotten 2 DUIs at this point, and I had moved to Ireland for a year to study abroad, and I was like, I'm never going to get another DUI again because I don't have to drive. And like, what a bizarre thought, right? Like, and at that point, my alcoholism,
like the thing that's going to stop you from getting a DUI is not driving.
Exactly. I'm so irrational. Yeah. And like that, yeah, like, and I moved back a year later, and I got one within 3 months of moving back, and then slowly but surely they just got closer and closer together. By the time I had hit 30, it was just like out of control. Before I knew it, I got sober when I was 33. And the last 3 or 4 years of my drinking, I just remember one day, it was almost like it was a blur, you know? It was like the DUIs just got closer and closer together, and I was just becoming more and more fearful. I was constantly in a state of panic, and I couldn't look myself in the eye. Work no longer brought me joy. I couldn't look my clients in the eye. I felt like a liar, and I was, you know, I was drinking on the job, or jobs, or calling out of work. My work ethic went out the window. Everything that I meant to do, I couldn't. And I just became this shell of a person who wanted to do it but couldn't. Whatever it was. I wanted to show up for my boyfriend's kids. I couldn't. I wanted to show up for work. I couldn't. I wanted the money from the jobs that I wanted to work, and I couldn't even show up for them. It's so
interesting how it happens, where how alcoholism becomes this snowball that just keeps accumulating more snow as we get more anxiety, more shame, more regret, more fear over how our life is going and what's happening. We become more uncomfortable and need to drink more, you know, and so then we have more consequence. And as we have more consequence, the snowball accumulates more snow until we get to a point where hopefully the snowball crashes into something.
Yeah.
And we have a different
experience.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of is, right? It's like you either it's like you go one of 2 ways, right? Or 3, right? You're either like forced to stop because of some sort of physical ailment, or you run into problems with the law, or maybe some sort of spiritual or emotional
or you're going to lose your kids, or
awakening,
your family,
or something. And for me, like I remembered I was gambling a lot, so I was just throwing all of my money down the drain. I was living in my house for 6 weeks without having paid my gas bill. I got my car repossessed. I just like all of these things, and I found myself envying people who had power in their house.
Yeah.
And I was a person who had those things.
Right.
And I was like, what? How did I become this? Like, where did I go wrong? And I remembered thinking one day, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic, but I can't remember the last day I didn't have a drink. You know, it was just all of a sudden, I don't remember the last day I didn't have one. I would go and do hot yoga, and I would have had drink before. You know, I was like doing all the things, still drinking. I was drinking and driving on the way to work.
I can't imagine doing hot yoga after drinking. You're making me want to throw up. Like it's hard enough being in that room as it is, like that.
I can't imagine those poor
and
people
then
next to me
being smelly because you detox in there.
Yeah, I'm sure I wasn't a fan favorite at that point. You were probably like, get her out of here.
Yeah.
But but like I said, you know, like I was one of those where I was fortunate to have the kind of family that would get me out of binds, you know.
Fortunate, unfortunate.
And I say fortunate because my mom wants what's best for me, you know, and like looking back, it was beneficial for me, you know. Do I think I would have gotten on as long as I was able to? Probably not. But my snowball crashed when I got my 5th and final DUI, and I knew the jig was up at that point. And it was like that bittersweet kind of like moment, right? Where I knew that like I was sick at that point. I still hadn't identified as an alcoholic at that point yet. Like I knew that there was something wrong with me. I had kind of like dabbled in recovery and like, you know, hung out with some friends that were sober, but I didn't know what that really looked like. Like I just said I was sober and I was just not drinking. I wasn't really practicing any principles or trying to apply them to my life and be a better person. I was still suffering from being an alcoholic with my thoughts, you know, and riddled with shame from all of the things that I had done and not really healing from them. And so when I finally got that DUI, I remember I was just like, oh my God, like this is bad. This is a felony. Like, and I knew it because I had just gotten one before that. Like, you know, and
they told you that should you get another one, this is what's going to happen.
And I just knew, and I just knew that I knew it was game over, like at this point. And it was one of those things where I was just like, I'm gonna do whatever they tell me to do. And I could have paid a lot of money to have had a lesser severe program, and I chose not to. And I don't know why I chose not to, because I'm the one that likes the easy out. Right. I'm lazy, and
something in you was done.
Something in me was done, and I chose the one, they call it. Can I talk about that program?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's called they call it SOP. It's their serious offenders program, and it's for people that have 3 or more. And I was 3 or more, and for me, the biggest thing about it was an all-inclusive program. You know, it had the, you know, daily testing to make sure you weren't physically taking anything. It also had, you know, the psychological aspect included, where you had to go and take counseling and whatnot, and you could participate in a recovery program of your choice, and that would be part of what their program was like. And so for me, that was just like. And you had to be on house arrest for the first 6 months.
So the ankle monitor.
The ankle monitor. And so I did that, you know, and I did everything that they told me to do. I did everything.
There's a lot of humility that comes with being willing to do that and to wear an ankle monitor and to have that every day help you to remember, like, this is my life. This is serious. I have an opportunity to heal. Yeah. Like, I watched you go through that, and it was, I don't know, it was something very beautiful about your willingness and your spirit coming up and just watching you go through that. It was just, I mean, I'm sure you didn't think it at the time.
With my ankle monitor the size of my hand.
But yeah, but even watching you, like, over time, you know, you got into your recovery, you took to it like the drowning ceases a life preserver. You stopped smoking too, right?
Yeah.
And you stopped smoking, and then and you weighed a lot more back then too, and that came where you decided, you know, I'm gonna do something different here as well, which, you know, for me, that's what had to happen for me too. Like, I had a lot of you know, alcohol and drugs was never my only solution.
Yeah.
You know, I had a lot of solutions that were not really solutions, and so to watch people really, like, keep going and keep healing is beautiful. It's remarkable, and it's very easy for somebody to go to a particular group or program of some sort that's focused primarily only on one type of addiction, and say, at least my whole life is as long as I just don't do this. Yeah. But nothing to see here for the rest of it. Yeah. You know, I don't need to change anything else, and there is first things first, and there is, you know, deal with the thing that's most egregious first.
Oh, for sure.
But then as time goes, as we become more honest and more awake, we hit new bottoms. Things become less tolerable to us, and we want to make changes.
Exactly. And I remember too when I was in, when I first got sober, I was going through so I had kind of lost everything when I first got sober. I had gotten dumped right before, and your perception shifts when you get sober too, right? Like all my perceptions are ever changing. My relationship with God is ever evolving, and everything that has happened to me has really shifted to the perception of it's happened for me. So that relationship ended. Thank you, God. Thank you for removing from me what I would not have been able to do on my own.
Right.
And that was a blessing, Thank you for the 5th DUI that got me sober, and put me into a program that got me to stay sober, and was able to put me in a program that was long enough to put in place some sort of foundation that was stronger than this,
right?
And like that, I'm so grateful for that. But it doesn't look like that when I first get sober. It looks like I'm this victim, and poor me,
and this sucks.
Yes, and like you would drink too if you had the life that I have. And like I always make this joke, like I keep thinking that I'm getting these crappy hands, but like I'm the dealer the whole time, like I'm just like crappy hand after crappy hand, and I'm sitting there on the other end of the table.
Solitaire.
Yes, exactly. And like I'm so grateful that like I had that perception shift, and I remembered I was just like, I had gotten the breakup. I was living in my friend's guest room that my mom was paying for. Like, how lucky am I?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking I'm homeless, but there's literally friends that I've had that have been homeless, and I wasn't, And then, like, I didn't have a car, but my friend drove me everywhere. Like, I was so fortunate, and like, and then now I've gotten everything back times 10 because I have this, like, grateful heart in such a way that, like, I wasn't able to appreciate all the things that I had before.
And you're willing to keep trying to do the next right thing.
Yeah, and when I first got sober, I remember I had smoked. I would chain smoke like a pack a day, maybe more. And I remember my counselor. And I think one of the things too, when you first go into this court program, that's part of the things that they want you to look at too, is like just addictive behaviors in general.
Yeah.
They never really talked about food, but they did talk about smoking. And I would get like irritated, like I would be like, no, I'm still smoking, and I would be like, I have a vice. That's it. Yeah. Right now, that's the vice I get.
You can have all the other ones.
You've got everything else.
I draw the line right here.
Yeah, and so finally, like, I did snap at her one day, and I was like, listen, I'm getting to the point because you keep asking me. I was like, I'm going to lie to you. I was like, I'm not going to stop smoking anytime soon. And if I do, I will tell you. But I need you to stop asking me about it. Because I'm going to start to lie. Yeah. Because I'm tired of the question. Yeah. And so luckily she stopped asking. We had that balance, know. But she helped me heal from that relationship. She helped me change my perception of it. And so did like working, like actually like practicing principles and like looking at my part in that relationship and seeing what, like I tolerated a lot, so I kind of was a participant, I was a volunteer, like, and when I got sober, I kind of hit like an emotional bottom at one point, this was like within the last like year and a half, and I was like really struggling, like, and I didn't have thoughts of drinking, but I had like other thoughts that were kind of dark, and like I've never had those thoughts even in my drinking days, and I was just like uncomfortable in my skin again, and I was like, what do I do? And I just started like tearing apart my life, right? Like, and like, what can I do better? What can I do differently? I started looking at like what my ideals, like what kind of woman do I want to be? And just really starting to, and not just like looking at my ideals and bullet pointing like with words. I started defining them. And then I started putting like actions, like what does that word mean? And what does that look like in action for Lauren? Like, how do I become this type of person?
Give an example of that.
So like, if I want to be spiritually fit or like, what does that look like? What does that mean? What does spiritually fit look like? to me, you know, because everyone has a different perception of all these things. For me, that means somebody who is, one, patient, like somebody who is less reactive and responsive in a way that is responsible. Like I meditate and I invite God in and I ask for guidance in most, if not all things, because I'm human, you know, progress, not perfection,
Right.
because I know I'm not perfect. And I look for guidance in other people, and I look for these opportunities for growth, and I look for my opportunities to improve, you know? So, like, sometimes I can tell when I'm not spiritually fit, when I'm driving my car and I'm getting irritated that the seatbelt dinger is going off, but I refuse to put my seatbelt on. Right? It's my fault. Like, I am that, and that's something small, right? But, like, it's on a grand scale. There's things in my life that I get irritated with that I could be a part of the solution.
Right.
You know?
could do something else.
I could do something else. So I look at, like, stuff like that. Like, where am I inviting God in? Where's God in my life? And how can I be a part of a solution or kindness? Like, what's a kind and loving thing to do? Or,
I really like that. That's a really great exercise. You know, to, like, take kind of like a spot check inventory of, you know, this is where I feel like I am, and, you know, where is it that I really want to be, and what can I do differently to start making sure that I put myself in that position.
Yeah. And that was also where I started to look at my finances, right? Like, and, you know, I talk about, like, my ideals list, like who do I want to be, but also what kind of, like, person do I want as in a partner? Like, if I'm going to look at that too, right? Like, do I want someone that smokes? And even though I smoked at the time, no, I don't want that. Like, I didn't want somebody who didn't have a good credit score or wasn't financially responsible, or I didn't want somebody who wasn't physically active or didn't eat healthy. So if I'm not all of those things, how could I even look at somebody else and judge them or even think that they weren't, you know? And I remember once I had gone to church, and I know that this is, like, not so much recovery related, but it always resonated with me. Yeah. And it always resonated with me is that, like, so often we'll look at other people and we, like, sum them up to, like, ticks on a box, right? Like, are they X, Y, and Z? But rarely do we really look at ourselves and, like, become that. So, like, rather than looking for the person we want to spend the rest of our lives with, we become that person. And that was where I kind of took my ideals list, right? Like who do I want to become? And, like, I started, like, paying attention to my finances and my credit, and I started, like, eating super healthy and working out on a regular basis, and I started looking at like what does it look to be, like, considerate, but at the same time, like, what kind of person do I want to be, because I'm a pushover at the same time, because, you know, I bend over backwards, and then all of a sudden I'm upset because I'm, you know, giving too much when I don't have it, you know?
When I had to, like, let go of a lot of codependency, the vision of myself with my tail between my legs, going along with things that were not acceptable to me, became, like, almost like people having to imagine what their last drunk was like. To me, that was, like, I pictured this, and I probably have a very, like, uglier than truth picture of what that looked like, but I was like, I don't want to be her.
Yeah.
I've been her. I don't want to be her. You know, and how can I get to, for me, matter of fact, you know, no is a complete sentence. This is what resonates with me, and that's how I want to be. And so I envisioned that. I felt like it was given to me, the vision of that too. And that as long as I'm plugged in and letting go, that if I truly get that this is the next right step, or this is the boundary that needs to happen, I don't need to worry about anything else. I just set it and forget it. And it's just matter of fact. But if I am trying to run my own life, I'll be up in my head with what if and da-da-da and should I and what if da-da-da-da-da, and then I'm going to people please, or I'm going to self-abandon.
Concessions.
And so I could see, who do I want to be? I want to be a person who doesn't come from a story. I want to be from a person who comes from my intuition and just lives and lives. And so it's very much, I didn't realize I was doing something like that you just said, but I love the way you described it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for
I love
having
this.
me.
I mean, God, I love you, and I'm so grateful This has been a really good episode.
Oh, well, I love you. You've been like, honestly, like for me from day one, like you were always kind of like, you know, that little butterfly, you know, that I would see, you know, and I always looked up to you. I always thought you spoke about your recovery so eloquently and so articulately and like in a way that illustrated, you know, what calm and serenity looked like, you know, like how
Thank you.
you speak about it in such a way that's tactful, you know, and I mean that in like it's so hard sometimes to talk about some of our stuff without it getting, you know, it gets ugly, you know, and I just feel like a way, I love that you talk about it in a way that it's an ugly truth, but it's beautiful at the same time. And I feel like
Thank you.
that's what's so cool about sobriety and recovery is like it's sharing that shame, and it becomes such a beautiful connection with people that you wouldn't otherwise maybe connect with or be able to see their lights, you know, turn
Yeah.
on, and it's such a cool thing. And
You know why? Because we all think the same stuff. We all feel the same feelings. And,
Yeah.
But most people aren't going to say it. And,
Yeah.
and so if I have a way of, because for my own healing, I've seen it differently, I want to share it. I want to share it so that people can have maybe a different narrative themselves and laugh at some of the stupid stuff we've done and,
Yeah.
you know, laugh at ourselves for the things that maybe we felt like we were unlovable about. Like,
Yeah, and we
like
have a
get off
different
our own
experience
hose
with
already.
it.
You're
Yeah.
like, Jesus.
Yeah, it's like now, like I would never have laughed about it before, but like
Right.
now I can kind of laugh about that.
Yeah.
But I can only do that with friends that are in recovery
Right,
with me,
right,
right?
right.
Like if
People who don't get it,
no,
they'll have like that
my
deadpan
mom's friends
response.
would probably be like, "Your daughter has 5 DUIs," you know? Like my friends would be like, "Yeah, like
yeah, like maybe discerning, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So
we kind of
thank
laugh
you.
about it.
I love
Thank
you so much.
I love you so much, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Again, please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. And if you're interested in being on a show, just go to themeetingspace.com and contact us. We have all of our episodes up there as well. Thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio here in Las Vegas. See you next week.